Oh, hello everybody. Apologies, you caught me just die cutting my sentiment there. I thought I'd put my little introduction on. But clearly that didn't work today. Okay. Right, let's just move this across. And let's have a look. Hi Valerie, how are you? Put that up there. How is everybody? Right. Hi Carol, hi Karen. Can you just check that, or can I just check that you can hear me? It looks like my microphone is working. Hi Helen, how are you? Can you hear me? Hi Julie. You kept your word. You're here and you're not moving for anyone. That sounds like a good plan for the next hour or so. Well, at least until 3 o'clock, even if I finish early. You can replay it and just stay sitting there with a cup of tea or something till about 3 o'clock. You can tell them that I said so. Loud and clear. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Helen. Hi, Margaret. How are you? Okay. Right. Looks like my microphone is all up and working after last week's rest it had, obviously. Right. Thanks for joining me this afternoon then. So you can see the card that I've got prepared for you here today. I shall bring it up to the camera for you in a second. Today I thought I'd use the Spring Anemone. This is one of my favourite sets. I haven't used it in a little while, so that was really my excuse for using it today, to be honest. Just the fact that I really wanted to, and I have an idea in my head. So I'm going to try and bring you some sort of techniques, the best that I can over the weeks that are coming. A few different techniques, a few different things for you to try. So if I just raise this up for you, I know it's really pale colours. I possibly I need to just adjust that a little bit. What I might do, let me get myself a darker piece of card. Okay. Bring this card up. This isn't stuck down just yet, but if I do this, hopefully it will just focus the camera a little bit. If I bring that up and show you here, what you can see, it's white on white, and say basically stamping and shading techniques for you. But if you can look on here where I've stenciled, I've actually done some shading with some stamps. So I shall try and make that a little bit more evident on this one that I'm going to demo for you. So it's just a different way to add some different shading, to use your stamps there and just perhaps get a little bit more out of the stash that you have. And also I've created myself a background as well with a couple of different type of stamps to what I would normally use. It achieves a similar sort of effects, and hopefully if you've got these stamps in your stash, it might give you some ideas and some confidence on how to use them. So let me run through what I've used. And also, as with anything, you can put your favourite sentiment over the front of these. I had a few sort of sitting around here, but I think what I actually might do, I might leave the card blank. So it's when it sits in my stash, whereas when the opportunity comes up, I will put on something appropriate. Who else do we have here? Hi Donna, hi Linda. One of your favourite sets as well. Yeah, there's so much you can do with this. Oh, hi Helen, Helen Brand. We've got two Helens with us. I think you was with us last week, wasn't you, Helen? If I remember right, because I've got Helen, my sister. She always watches. She's a great support. And then, yes, we have a new Helen as well. So Let me put that to one side. I'll show you what I've used. So we have the Spring Anemone. Again, it's a 3D embossing folder with the die. This is the 5x7 size. So you can see here the embossing folder. But I'm actually using this on a square card today. So again, it's just nice to show you that you can mix and match just because it's been designed on a particular size card in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean you always have to use it that way. Then obviously we have the layering stencils. So we have 6 stencils included in this particular set. So actually, while I'm talking you through these, what I will put up for you is this. So if you do want to rewatch, then you can jot these down later on instead of perhaps taking notes now. So the background, the stamp that I've used, just in the background here, I have used the whitewashed texture stamp. It's an A6. Sorry, start again. It's a large set of stamps. Comes with the texture, which is a large square stamp, and you have some amazing text to go with this as well. Simple, bold, big font. So if I show you the stamp plate that we have here, you can see the text is really large in relation to my fingers there. Really bold, simple. It makes a statement. Stamp straight onto your cards in black. You can't mistake it. It's actually one of my favourite ones to use. But we also have the texture stamp, which is large. And if I remember right, there were 4 of these sets, texture sets, really large stamps. So if you wanted to make a square card, then that's pretty much giving you your background. Now, I do appreciate that this size stamp is intimidating because it's a really large piece of acetate. I'll just take the backing off there. But what I tend to do with these stamps is not use them as I don't peel them off the backing. I use them sort of in situ. So what I want to show you today is how I went about doing that. And you don't have to use the whole thing all at once either. So if you do have these and you look at them and they sort of do intimidate you a little bit, hopefully I can just break that down and you can have the confidence to give that a go. Also, what I've used here, you'll see, just raise that again. I have got some text in the background. One of my favourite things to do always, put some text. Now, I would normally use the A6 Textures stamp set, this one here. And we have some lovely text in the centre, and we do have the distressed images as well. I use this all the time pretty much, but what I've tried to do today is stay away from this a little bit and just give you alternatives. So the alternative I used for the text today was the postcard stamp. So we have that lovely text in the middle. Now, the great thing about this stamp is that we don't have the outline to the postcard. So when you stamp this, and again, and I should use this it's quite a different way as well. When you stamp this, you won't get that hard edge line around the outside, which if you want that, the best thing to do, to be honest, is to stamp it out and draw with a ruler around it, or stamp it out, and then when you've got this stamp on your cardstock, take a pen and just trace around the outside of the rubber, because that will give you the exact size. But for purposes of today and for other projects that you use this with, and I think I might try and use this more actually as well, because it's a really nice one to use. You don't have the outside, so you haven't got the limitations of having the odd rogue line that you don't want stamped. So again, I'll show you how that works really well to create background. So that's those. And also the last thing I want to show you, just for the matte and layering purposes, again, you can use whichever fits your project you want to use, but today I've opted with the nested stitch bubbles squares. This would look good with any of your nesting dies. It'd look great using your rectangle nesting dies, your rectangle bubble rectangle, the nested bubble rectangles. It's easier said. It's really tricky to get out some of these names sometimes, but yeah, this design would look amazing on a rectangle card also. Say I'm opted with the square today. Now you'll see also that I've got a shadow outline in the background here. So you could, if you wanted, just create the background as is, and then you could just put a sentiment on the front, one of your bold sentiments that have got lots of words that you could just put that in the centre, and that in itself would work really well. And perhaps if you were creating note cards or a set of 5, 7 cards to give to somebody, as I did the other day, just a simple background like that would be really pretty. Doing it in different colours, just move some of the stamps around in different ways, then they'd all look different. So that's enough chatting. Let's get stenciling for you. So what I will show you today is how to create the background and how I stenciled the anemone here onto white card. And also it might be a nice idea to try this onto other pale card stocks, I think, either onto a pale pink, pale green, or a pale blue. A cream would be really nice as well. So I'm going to bring in my Ultimate. So you've seen the items that I'm using. I'm just going to put this, take that away. Let me see. Why is that not working? Oh, for some reason that's not working. I don't know why. Why can't I don't get rid of that overlay there? Why is my mouse not working? Okay, I don't know. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's not worry about that too much. Okay, so let's get stenciling, shall we? So I've cut myself a piece of card. Again, Lisa's super smooth card, the white cardstock. I'm using the stencils. So we have a set of 6 stencils. Again, I'm using this with the pegs on the side because it allows the image to sort of come together for you the right way round. You may choose to have your stencils on top, but again, it's preference really. You'll find your most comfortable way of using this. So the colours that I'm using today, I'm only using 3 colours actually. I'm using Cobblestones, Woodland Moss and Margarita. So yeah, quite a muted background really, but it comes together so nicely. And if you were to give this a try yourself, I think you'll find that it actually looks better in real life as opposed to trying to see it on screen. Oh, my mouse is working, but I don't know. Oh, technical issues. There's always something, isn't there? Always something. I don't know why that's not coming off. We might have to just carry on working with that list up on the side, and I don't know why. I don't know why. Let's hide it. Okay, well, let's not worry about that. Okay, I think you can still see what we're doing. Right, so let's get stenciling. Right, the overriding colour I want to have on this today is like the grey colour. So I'm going to use Cobblestones. So I'm going to go, the base colour of what I'm doing, it will be Cobblestones, but what I want to do is add a touch of green to this. So I'm going to add Cobblestones to this first layer initially. I went quite dark there, but I shall keep it quite light over the rest of it. Now, before I swap colour, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give that a quick wipe just to take off the majority of that cobblestone's ink. Because what I want to do is come in with the woodland moss and just give that grey a green tint. You could do it the other way around, but this gives the grey a green tint as opposed to giving a green colour a grey tint. But again, it's entirely up to you. This is sort of the preference that I'm going for. So that's the woodland moss on there. So stencil number 2, we come in with the leaves, and again I'm going to come in with cobblestones using a blending brush this time, and just really gently put some grey through this. Now I don't want to make this too strong because obviously then we won't be able to colour tint over the top of it. So I'm just going to go in really lightly with the grey, and if I take that away, you will see that colour sitting there. So let's just turn that down, so hopefully we can see that coming together. So it's sort of going to be a monotone, but it's sort of a tinted colour, as it were. So again, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that stencil back over the top, and I'm going to give that also a hint of green. And at the moment, I'm just using the colour that is left on the brush just to see how much is there. Because we don't want to put so much green on that it covers the grey, because then there would have been not much point of putting that on at all. So I'm going to add that like that. And when I take that away, you will see that there is just that hint of green going on there. Okay, now does that look so bright? What I might do, I might just turn my lights down. I'm not sure. Ah, there we are. That's a better light, isn't it? You can see more like that. Can you see more? Okay, what I really must do is learn to use brighter colours, I think. I do like the effect that these give. So this next stencil, I'm coming in with stencil number 3. So this is going to fill in our flowers. Now I want the flowers to be white. So to do that, we use a grey or just any shade, and we only shade around the outside of the aperture. I say a grey because that really does give the illusion of the flowers being white. So if we just go around the outside and create that halo like so, we just push that ink just into the aperture there. We're pretty much getting like a shadow around the outside of the flower, but the inside is left white. That is so bright. I'm conscious you can't see this. There we are. Can you see that? Let me just see the comments. I'm just checking that you can see that. Oh, hi Lisa. How are you? Is that Lisa or is that Dawn? It's Lisa. How are you feeling after your travels? Are you back? Okay. Oh, that is fine. I'm good. I just wanted to check. The list isn't on the side, Claire. Or is it not? Has it come off? Why is my screen not showing that then? Oh, okay. So you can see different things on your screen to what I can see. So if I do that, can you see the colours? No, you can't. I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay. Right, so before I remove this stencil, what I want to do is add some shading, but add texture. So I don't want to do shading with my brush this time. I'm going to come in with the texture stamps. Okay, so I'm going to use this little distressed one here because it's a nice easy one, small one to use through this aperture. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I've got either some copy paper on the side or I've got my messy mat that I can just use to take off some of the ink. And I'm going to pick up some of the grey. This sticks to my hand, and if you remember from last week, I used some distress techniques. I don't want to stamp this as a whole and have such a bold impression. I just want to use a second impression stamping and just get the impression of texture in through this. So I'm going to pick up some of the cobblestones ink, just blot off the majority of the ink, and what I'm going to do, just round the outside of the flower, I'm just going to stamp until all of that ink has gone. And what this is doing is adding some texture through the aperture of the stencil onto the flower. This just gives a different look. I mean, if you find this is too much of a distressed look for you, then obviously you can just stick with your blending brush and add as much or as little colour as you like. I mean, that's the beauty of crafting, isn't it? It's we're here to give you ideas. You can give it a try. If you don't like it, then obviously you can go back to what you want. But it's nice to have new ideas. So what I'm doing is just working around the outside where I added that little bit of ink, and I'm just adding some texture. Because if you look at flowers in the garden, they're very rarely blended nice, you know, just a nice, easy blend colour. A lot of them are, obviously. So I'm not going to overdo that. I'm just going to leave that as it is. And when I take that away and lift that up for you to see, can you see how that texture has just added a bit of interest to those flowers? And you can start seeing now how that grey and that green really works together on and make a really subtle, really lovely subtle colours on there. So next thing to do is to bring in stencil number 4. We want to create the centre of the flower here, because at the moment it is just like a solid petal. So I'm going to come in with cobblestones again, with I might actually do a smaller brush actually. Cobblestones on a small stencil brush, and I'm going to work in the centre of the flower and just work that ink into the stencil material and then push that onto the card on the outside. And what that is going to give me is just a really concentrated amount of ink in the centre of the flower, and then I'm just gently going to blend what is left on my stencil brush up into the details of that petal like that. So that will give those details of those petals, but I'm still keeping the whiteness of the flower. Now what also we need to do is go around the outside of these flowers, because that will give that double edge. So that will just highlight the outside of the flower. And that little bit of shading now will really blend into that stamped texture that we added and just make the whole thing look a lot more sort of coherent. So I'm just gently going around the outside. I'm adding a little bit more around the outside of the flower than I did first time round with stencil number 3. And I'm being really gentle, not to overload the centre of the flower, because we do want to basically have a white flower at the end of the day. So we have another centre of the flower here. So I've just picked up a bit more ink, and I'm just going to, the same way as I've done on this larger flower here, I'm just going to work around so we have that centre of the flower highlighted. And then I can work up onto this third flower out here. And I'm just working just as I'm tipping into the edge of that aperture. So I'm blending where I've stamped. So that's making that stamped texture look less prominent. So therefore it makes it look a lot more natural onto the flower. And I'm just working that in. And when I take this away in a second, you'll see just the amount of detail that this small amount of ink and small amount of blending will actually give. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that that's a bit darker around there. And I'm using small amounts of ink, and if you use your stencil as a palette around the outside, you don't waste any of the ink, and it really goes onto the page really nice and diffused. So before I move that now, I'm just going to come in with let me see, yeah, picked up the cobblestones brush again. I'm just going to come into where these leaves are and just put a little bit of grey into those, just so as we keep the theme of that grey green going on. not too much into that. And then before I move the stencil, I'm going to add some more woodland moss. Now I might put slightly more of the woodland moss on this time than I did first time round, just to give a different intensity of colour. So then that shows that there's sort of a bit of dimension going on with what you're stenciling. So there is a very small amount of ink that I'm using here. So when I take that away, you can see the effect that that has given. Let me just tilt that so you can see the colour. You can see how beautiful those two colours work together. And say, if you do give this a try and you are sort of light-handed with it, it's such a beautiful combination. I really, really like it. And you say you've got that's the texture around the outside. It works so well. Now, what you can do, if you think that you might need a little bit more, and I said I would go a little bit heavier with that texture this time, just so as you can see it. So I'm going to replace stencil number 2, and I'm going to just carry on and just do a little bit more stamping, just so as you can see that when I lift that to the camera. So it's always easier to do less and then go back in if you think you need some more. Now I think this would work really nicely if you were using pinks and purples as well. And we're all going to have a colour that we prefer to use and that sort of works well with our eye. I mean, I struggle with reds and things, and I very rarely can see how that blend works really nicely. But when I use colours like this, the muted colours, it just sits nicer on my eye. So I'm a lot happier blending and adding more as we go. So I'm just going to add that little bit more there, go a little bit darker where the areas of the foliage would be in a bit more shade. So when I take that away, it looks a mess when you have all that stamp around the outside, but when you take it away, the effect that it has leaves on the card, I think is really pretty. So we have stencil number 5. So this is where I'm going to introduce the margarita colour. So this would be a really good opportunity to either come in with your pinks or yellow even, depending on the other colour choices that you've made, and give these flowers a little pop of colour. So I'm going to put that through the stencil like so. Okay, if I go quite heavy, what I will do, just to tone that down before I move this, I'm going to come in with the cobblestones and just swipe that over the top, and that will just add that bit of shadow. It will just mute that lovely brightness, but it will keep the tone there. We have a few berries and things here, so I'm just going to add the grey first to where those berries are, and then come in with a margarita and just colour tint those again. And I think using the margarita will give just a different shade alongside the woodland moss. So if I take that away, it just adds that extra dimension and just that new colour to the piece, and that just, yeah, it just works really, really nicely. Now, what if you wanted to, you can just die cut yourself your square that's going to sit onto the card and just stencil that on it and put that straight onto the card without worrying about die cutting or embossing or anything, because I think that would look really nice. That would look really smart. Then you'd be able to just add a really simple die cut over the top of that, and that would work really nicely. Or you could use one of the really bold sentiments and stamp in black just over the top of this here. Again, that would look really, really smart, and it would really make that image pop. But we'll continue stenciling. Last stencil, number 6, and I will come in with the cobblestones. And this is the grey accent on the leaves. And I'm just going to come in and just keep this grey, perhaps go a little bit heavier, just to add the contrast to the rest of the image, which at the moment is quite pale, isn't it? But even on pale pastel images, you need something that sort of contrasts to make the rest of the colours really pop. So I shall just come in with that, make sure you get all those little areas along. I won't tint this green, I shall just leave that as it is. So when I take that away, that's what gives the whole image a nice grounding, gives it a nice, there, I tilt it that way, just gives it a nice contrast. Okay, right, so we've done that now. I'm going to, I should die cut and emboss this. Now, one tip actually, I thought I must remember to tell you, if anybody has any troubles lining up their dies, or I find it sometimes really tricky that you sometimes knock these out of place, and it depends on different days actually. Some days I'm more clumsy than others, but because I'm working onto the magnetic mat here, it obviously makes our dies stick to it, which is perfect. Which, when you're lining up the dies onto your stencil design on the magnetic mat, you've got that assurance that the die isn't going to slip off all over the place. What it does, it gives you a bit more control over lining up your die. So once you've lined it up, you can then take your hands away from it, know that that isn't going to move anywhere because the magnets are holding it all in place. So there's no, if you beat across your desk, you're not going to sort of jolt it out of position or anything like that, which I usually do because, again, I am quite clumsy. So you know that that's sitting in place, and what that enables you to do is to get yourself your masking tape so you can secure that die in position. So when you lift this up, you know that everything is all in place. So I thought that was a really nice tip, which I forgot to share with you last week actually. So I'm just going to die cut this now. So that's die cut really nicely. Just take out those extra bits there. And then we can line this up in our embossing folder. So again, I think Dawn would have gone through this yesterday. So find yourself 2 different points on your design to line up. Line up one of those first, hold it in place against the top of the embossing folder, and then just add those fine adjustments just to make sure that that second point that you picked lines up also. Then keeping that one hand, you notice that there's one hand that stays sort of with the design and the embossed folder clamped in hand. Then you can close this down, grasp all 3 layers here at the top before you move that hand away. And that pretty much secures that design in place in your folder. Okay. Hi, Karen. Okay, the colours. Actually, they would work really well for a sympathy card, actually, Helen, they would. They are so pretty. Let me pick up I'm conscious that you'll be able to see the colours. If I just do this, I don't know if that's going to focus, actually. There we are. Tilt that away. You get some shadow there. It's really nice. It would work really nice with a dusky pink, I think, as well, on the grey. So we have our image stencil. So now we go on to the background, and what I'm going to do is bring in the large background stamp. It comes on 2 carrier, or sandwiched between 2 carrier sheets. There's one of them that is easier to take off, and that's the one that I've just removed, and I'm leaving it on the other one. So all stamps are all still attached to the base sheet, and that is how I'm going to use this big stamp. Now I've cut myself the background, which is on the nested squares, so I'm working onto a square, And I want to create like this really distressed look background and the text in the background as well. Now, I went straight in with the stamp on this one. This time, I think I just might add a little bit of shading with a large stencil brush just to take off a bit of the whiteness. So the blending brush just take off a lot of the ink before you come onto your cardstock. Again, this is just taking off the whiteness. It really is just a colour tint. I'm not looking to add any major blends of colour here. So I'm just taking off the majority of that whiteness there. Okay. Now, what I want to use in the background here is a blend of all these colours again, so it keeps it in coordination with what I just stenciled. And right, the way to do this, I'm not going to, well, actually, first thing, I will ink this whole stamp, and I'm going to do it with the Margarita this time. So just gently, I'm just going to ink the whole of this stamp, okay, all the way over. I don't want a perfect impression like the way I was saying before with here. Okay, so I'm not going to want a perfect impression, so I'm just going to cover the majority of that, and then I'm going to take off some of that ink. So I've just got a piece of copy paper here. You can see it's one that I've even used from last week, and just lay it over the top and just gently, no force, but just gently, just brush over the top of that. And what you'll see is that you're taking off the majority. I've lost all your comments. I don't know what's going on with that today. So that's just going to take off the majority of the ink. So I'm going to take my piece of cardstock that I've just colour tinted and lay this down onto the top. And this time I'm going to press down a lot more. So whatever ink is left there is now going to be picked up on my background. Okay, and this takes away the how intimidating this large stamp is, because you're actually taking the card to the stamp and not the other way around. So I'm going to peel that away, and there is just a really small amount of texture on there. You don't want any more than that, because this is just building up layers, but that is definitely there. And because I'm working with a pale colour, it means then I can build on top of that. So this is the way to think when you are building a background. Work with really pale and subtle layers to start with, and the more intense details that you want to see would be the ones that you put on last. So this is what we're going to work towards now. So now I'm going to pick up the Woodland Moss, and this time I'm just going to ink just down one side of this stamp, okay? Just like that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this round because it makes it easier because I'm right-handed. This is the side that I've stamped. You can see the ink sitting there. I'm going to take the cardstock. I'm not going to lay it down as I did before. I just want to put a little bit of ink and texture just along this side. So I'm going to keep this side up, and I'm just gently going to lay that on there and just gently just press with the finger, not too much, and then I'm going to lift it off. And what you'll see, we have just that little bit of texture there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to ink this side again, not too much, you don't need too much there. And I'm going to rotate my piece of card because I now want to stamp along this side. And I do the same thing again, just touch that onto the stamp, and then it will pick up that texture. It will be different each time you do it, but that's what you want because we are going for the distressed look. Now, I'm not going to ink it this time. I'm just going to see what ink is left there and pick up that second generation of ink and just see how we go. You might need to press a little bit more this time, but now you can see we've got that texture there again. And I think what I'll do, just add a tiny bit of ink, not too much. If you want to alternate it and use different sides of the stamp, then that would be a different way, you know, that'd be a nice way to do it as well. So now we've got all areas of our background. We have like a border of distressed texture. So the next thing to do, I think we want to add some contrast because we've got lots of green on there, so we will add some cobblestone. So I'm going to work on a different area of the stamp. We used the green on this side, so I'm going to put the cobblestones on. I'm going to ink less this time around. I'm putting the ink pad at an angle and just working down the side of that stamp. And I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to make sure that a really thin strip of this cardstock goes onto that texture. And you can see the way that I've picked that up along there. So that's going to give a different colour and just a bit of contrast to this distressed look. So I'm going to put the ink down again. I'm keeping the majority of the card up and just going to just swipe down gently. And can you see how that is building up that texture along the side of the edge of the card? We're building it up in layers. So the darkest layer, the layer that is going to be most prominent, is this with the cobblestones, and this is what I'm putting on last. So you can see that that's building up really nice, but I'm not using this whole stamp, and I don't have the inflexibility of picking up the whole stamp. You see, I don't need a stamping platform for this. I mean, to use the stamp in that way is absolutely perfect as well, because that's the way it's been designed. But I think this is perhaps a less intimidating way of doing it. So now we've got that. If you want to, you can come in with a blending brush, a little bit of ink, and just add a bit of shadow around the outside, and that will just soften it all down. That's entirely up to you. Again, when you're making backgrounds, it's really sort of what's pleasing to your eye. And you'll find if you do give this a go, you'll develop a pattern of how it's done, because then I know what I like to see, and sort of I tend to gravitate towards using the same techniques each time. So I've created like a even darker border. I've blended that stamp texture in just by adding a bit of blending with my brush there. So you can see how this is going. So when I put this on here, the whole thing coordinates really nicely together. But we do need a little bit more detail in the middle, I think, because we have like a window here that we do need to cover up. So this is where I would either use the text stamp from the textures, or this time I thought I'd give the postcard stamp a go. So I'm going to use this on the carrier. So I'm keeping that on. So this is basically acting like the platform for me, because it gives me something to hold on to. Again, I don't want an absolutely perfect impression of everything that's on here, so I do want to have that distressed look. So with this larger stamp, I can bend it. So that means I can actually get areas of the stamp and have a graduation of ink when I go to stamp it down. So what I will do, I'm going to move this over here so I've got a bit more flexibility. So I'm bending that stamp. You can do it this way as well. Again, it takes a little bit of practice, just a little bit of confidence. So I'm just going to touch the stamp shaped like this onto the ink pad. It's going to pick up an amount of ink. I don't know what it is, and this is the beauty of creating something distressed. And I'm just going to put that straight down. Now, not all of this stamp is going to be inked because of, you know, where you've touched it onto the ink pad. So that means I can let that go. And we have some text detail there. Doing it like this does make it random, which it's a lot easier to do random when you don't necessarily know where the ink's going to go, as opposed to planning something random, which inevitably never turns out as random as you want. So again, I've just picked up that little bit of ink. I've used a different part of the stamp, and I'm stamping it down this time. I'm not really pushing very hard, and if areas don't stamp very well, then so be it. That's not really what I'm after. So the beauty of this stamp is also it does have some distress details too. So I'm going to ink those up and make sure that I get those areas on the background also. So I'm just carrying on, and I'm inking one half of the stamp. Now the other way to do it is to ink that half of the stamp. I know all of that is inked, but when I lay this on the card, I'm only going to touch with my fingers a certain amount of it, and it will be that prints onto the cardstock. So there we are. I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to go too much more than that. So I should show you that there now. You may want to do this and add a little bit of contrast with a different colour. That's entirely up to you. But what I will do now, this is going to get mounted onto there. So I'm going to bring in the card blank. I've got my green layer, which coordinates. I have my matten layer, which will just ground that dark frame around the outside will just break up all that green against there, and it just grounds it. It just really does frame it and just sort of puts everything into sort of perspective, I think. And then this will sit on top of there. But I do want to break up this image a little bit against the background. So one way to do that, we can either die cut ourselves an image the same as this. We don't need to stencil it or emboss it, but just use a darker colour. Then we can mount these together but offset them. So you can, because they are exactly the same, obviously coming from the same die cut, they would actually layer up exactly the same size. But if you just offset, so you have a little bit of that colour showing through underneath, that acts as a shadow. So when we add that onto our card, that dark layer underneath, that shadow, is enough of a break from the background to the main image just to separate them. Now the other way of doing this, which I thought was quite a nice idea, is to, what did I do with that piece? I die cut myself. I'll put it somewhere. There it is. I've also die cut the image just from a white piece of cardstock, and you can see that I've used this on the card before. I'm just going to move those to one side, and then you position this where you will want your die cut to be. And you can either tape this down or just hold this down. And what I'm going to do is just come in and just use the cobblestones and just blend some ink around the outside, so we end up with a shadow. Now when you do this, you pick up the ink, you blend the majority of it off onto the die cut, not onto your background project, and you just blend round and round and just then start pushing the ink off of your die cut onto your blended background. And what that will do is start creating a shadow for you. So if you wanted to create just a single layer card, either because, I mean, it could be that you're low on your favourite dark cardstock to create the shadow. I mean, that happens sometimes, doesn't it? Or it's for posting limitations. But this acts like a really nice shadow. And if you use a contrasting colour, it makes all the difference. Now, you can really go to town on this. And it's something, again, that you build up in layers. So I'm just going to work all the way around this. But also, as you can see here, you can just create that shadow. And you don't need to put the die cut or the stencil die cut over the top of it at all. You can just use it as is. It's just quite a nice technique to make the use of your dies and your die cuts. So I'm going to work all the way around like this. So we'll create a shadow. So you, if you had a little bit more time, then obviously you wanted to create a shadow, you really want that to make a big difference. So I shall just leave that as it is. So, but when I take that away, you can see that is where the image is going to be. So if you didn't want to add your dark die cut, you can add your die cut to it like that, and you have a natural shadow happening all the way around, like so. So that really does pull it all together when you then layer this onto the mats and layers, like so. So there's a couple of different options there. And again, what you could do is just use it like this, and you could stamp your sentiment in. I think that's a really nice idea. Or you can add it like so, and it just acts as a really nice highlight. Okay. So, and again, I'm pretty sure this would work really nicely with lots of different colours. Like so. So if I leave that like that, and then you can add your sentiment across either way, or you can use it in a gold. Actually, we don't want to hide that image too much, do we? So we could perhaps put that down the bottom there. And it might actually be really nice to do some of the highlighting with the interference inks as well, because then you introduce that little bit of shine through the mica on there as well. Now, I don't think, for some reason, I can't see all of your chats. I don't know why, and I can't see them on Facebook either. So I'm hoping that you stayed with me. I'm hoping that you enjoyed that and you were able to see that. No, I've been logged out for some reason. I don't understand why. I shall sort that out in a second. So, yeah. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you do give that a go. I hope you like sort of the different technique there. It's just a different way to add something different to your stenciled images, perhaps even to your favourite images. Just change it up a little bit, perhaps change the colours. So it's just Tuesday for me today, so Dawn will be with you on Thursday. I look forward to tuning in on Friday, so who knows, Lisa might give us some little tidbits of what the shows that she went to in Germany at the weekend, so that would be interesting. But thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. Take care, and I'll see you all again soon.